Okay, and Rafi, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Einav. Okay, so welcome to this webinar. We're going to talk about new workflows that were introduced just now, this November release, and we're very excited about them. And I would like to cover everything I think you need to know in order to start using these workflows immediately after we finish this webinar. So let's start. The first thing that we'll do, or generally I'll just present you the agenda. So we're going to first talk about how are these features available for you, because they are in Rialto, but they are available to all Alma users, and I'll explain to you the logic behind that. Then we'll talk about what are these collection development tasks that we're trying to address with these features. And what are we offering you, and what are the principles that we were thinking of when we were designing these workflows? And then I'll dive in to a demo, demonstrate various use cases where you can use these cool workflows. And then we'll talk a bit more about the design, about configurations, roles and permissions, all those things that you probably want to know. And what are we planning ahead for these features? Because we still have a lot ahead of us. And I'll make sure to leave a few minutes for questions. And of course, if we don't cover all the questions, we'll collect them and make sure to get back to you with responses later on. So let's start. So the first thing, as I said, these workflows are available for all Alma users. However, they are under the Rialto area. Now, this means that even if you don't have Rialto today, if you don't have the marketplace implemented in your system, you can still enable these workflows. And that is because Rialto is evolving, Rialto is changing, and basically it's becoming the central hub for collection analysis and development in the platform, in the Ex Libris platform. That's the goal here. And a lot of the features and developments that we are doing are going to be available. Anything that is not dependent on the actual technical aspects of the marketplace are going to be available for all Alma users. Okay, so it's a change in Rialto. Okay, if Rialto was until now only a marketplace and a place where you'll do your acquisitions or select items and build your new disciplines and so on, which is a major part of collection development. Now we are adding more layers and more aspects of collection development. So we're adding what we're going to show you now, these collection development workflows, and there are a few principles that Rialto is going to be based on. So it's going to have, it already has actually, even in the marketplace, but also in these features, there's a lot of very intelligent analytics behind the scenes. You can define your needs, and then according to that analytics, we create for you recommendations. And then we offer you solutions, how to develop your collection, how to fulfill requests in the most intelligent way. So it was always a marketplace, and it still has that component, but it has now other elements as well. And we are not looking only at acquisition. The things that we are offering, the solutions that we are offering are not only acquisition related, they can also be maybe in certain cases you would want to do resource sharing, for example. So these are the kind of things that we're going to address within this new evolving Rialto that's available for all Alma users, and it's very simple and easy to enable, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's talk a bit about collection development workflows, especially regarding to these new ones that we're adding to Rialto. And I would like to focus on the deselection. Deselection, or what many call weeding, is a flow that we hear many of you in these kinds of tasks. And we hear a lot of librarians in those processes on an ongoing basis, because real estate is very expensive and you want to clear space on your shelves. You need to have exactly what is needed and what is requested by your patrons, by your researchers, and anything else, if you can, you would like to take off the shelves, right? That's one aspect. Another aspect is reclaiming more space, maybe space for students to come and study. So we know that there's a change in libraries, especially when there's more electronic resources, and shifting and reclaiming more space, and therefore a lot of libraries are busy with deselection processes. Now today, until today, in order to do a good deselection process, what a librarian would have to do is look at the inventory in Alma and then start taking into account various aspects, like the number of items that you have for the titles. What is the usage on those titles? Are these titles, do they exist in external archives like HathiTrust, for example? And even start looking outside and seeing, is it held by other institutions? Now here it becomes interesting because we heard from many institutions that check or want to know the availability of titles that they consider deselecting, even if they're not part of an official shared print group. So it could be that you're part of a network zone and you want to know if other members are holding certain titles, but it could be that you are part of a consortium that's not an Alma network zone, and it could be that you just want to see geographically what are the institutions that are close to you, and do they hold one of those titles that you are considering to deselect. So taking into account all those aspects, it requires a lot of analytics. You can use a lot of those things and find the analytics through Alma Analytics, but some of the aspects here, some of the data sets are even not included in Alma. For example, external data, whether of other institutions, even in your network, or of course, external data like HathiTrust. Another thing that probably you would look at, for example, is P&E, right? You would see what are your electronic resources, and if you don't have usage on those prints, and if there's an overlap, maybe you would consider deselecting print versions that you have an electronic portfolios for. So once you created that list, then you go ahead and you start doing those actions. And the actions as well are complicated. You need to start gathering the lists, creating sets, and then doing whatever you do in your institution. And here as well, we hear many different kinds of ways to deal with withdrawing, right? There's different processes in different libraries. Now, with these new workflow Rialtos, we offer a solution that takes you from the beginning, from your requirements, all the way to the action in one workflow without any need to do all that analytics. All the analytics is done behind the scenes, under the hood, and it's up to you to just define what are your criteria, where do you want to look at, what are your policies, what is your strategy, and then we will offer you recommendations and actions all in that same workflow. So you can imagine the level of efficiency that we are trying to offer with these tools, and I hope that you'll find that they are very efficient, can save you a lot of time, and turn these tasks that are not easy tasks to do, that can be a pretty big burden on you, into controlled, ongoing processes that are relatively easy to do and don't require too much resources and time. I know that this is a big promise, and I'll show you how we want to do that. Now, just to make sure that we are all aligned, when we talk about those collection development tasks, we are looking at various aspects. So we're talking about retention, committing items for retention, and deselection. These are basically sort of mirror workflows to each other, and they're very closely related to shared print. So if you have shared collections in a consortia, if you want to take into account what other institutions are holding, that is also under that category. Then you have the expansion. How do you choose what to purchase? How do you make sure that you have everything you need to support outstanding research? And that is already supported to a certain extent with the existing Rialto, but we are going to create new workflows that are going to be relevant to all of Alma users and not only to those who have the market implemented in this area as well, helping you to expand and diversify your collections, as well as fulfilling them in the right way with informed fulfillment. That's a concept that we have been talking about lately, and that's also part of Rialto, which means that if you search, for example, in the marketplace in Rialto, you will see options that are also not only the market. Maybe you can actually fulfill this by resource sharing. This is something that will be available to all Alma users in the coming year, in 2026. And these things, of course, are closely related to cost savings, right? Whether it's the real estate aspect and whether it's acquisition versus resource sharing, and space optimization, that of course is directly related to anything that has to do with managing your physical inventory. Okay, so let's now, in one sentence, tell you what are these workflows, and I think you will see how they correspond with the actual demo. So we're enabling you end-to-end workflows that are going to be according to your library policy and needs. You will tell the system what are your policy and what are your needs. And then we will leverage your institutional data as well as external data that you defined, because that's what you need to know as part of your process, and we'll generate for you actionable recommendations. Now, these actions, these recommendations that have actions are consolidated from Alma. Now, what that means is that you will have Alma actions that we're going to bring to you. They're going to be part of the workflow. You won't need to go to the specific areas in Alma, but they're going to be part of that workflow. Another aspect that's important to point out here is we're not offering here new features. Everything we're offering already exists in Alma in terms of the features. What we are offering here is the end-to-end workflow, the ability to run an analysis and get those actions in the right place, in the right time, without the need to go in and out of the system. That's what we are offering. That's where the innovation comes here. But the actions themselves are Alma actions that are just consolidated into these workflows. And that's an important aspect because it has to do with roles and permissions that I'll talk about later. So what are the three principles of this tool? First of all, end-to-end. As I said before, we want to help you from the moment you define your criteria all the way to the action that you want to do on those items. It's available to all Alma users, whether you have the market implemented or not. The way to join is by opting in and giving consent in the data sharing profile, and we'll talk about that in just a moment when we start the demo. And we want to offer you a streamlined experience that integrates Alma actions where you need them. So these are the three principles, and I think we can go ahead now and dive in to our demo. So I'm just gonna open now the Alma, and Einav, if you can let me know if you can see my environment.
Yeah, we see your login.
The Alma page, great.
Yes.
Okay, so a few things to say about this environment. So this is a demo environment, and one important aspect that I just want to point out is that the data that we have here is very far from what you have in your libraries, okay? So I wouldn't focus in this demo, when you look at this demo, at the data. That doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. What we want to show you here are the actions, the type of information you will see and you can do, some of the actions that you can do. So really, I would say ignore the not very representative data and focus on the possibilities and opportunities that these workflows will offer for you. I can say that we've seen how this functionality works in real environments with our early adopters, and I think you will find them very interesting and powerful. Another aspect that I would say is that this environment represents a user that does not have the marketplace implemented, which means they haven't had any Rialto on their Alma system, on their Ex Libris system so far. And in order to enable this, the thing that you need to do in order to enable these workflows is that your administrator needs to go to configurations, go to general. It's a very simple opt-in. And then you go to the data sharing profile. Let's find it here for a minute. Let's see. Here we go, data sharing profile. And now what you'll see from November release is we have a new area. We had the resource sharing consent, and now we have a consent for collection, analysis, and development. Now, just to clarify, this consent is to share with other institutions in Alma your title data, your title level and holding level data. Of course, no personal data is involved, no private data is involved, no monetary data is involved, and if you have anything suppressed, it won't show in the analysis as well. So basically, I would say that this pretty much represents what someone could see in your discovery systems, right? That's pretty much what you're consenting here, to use that data that's available usually in your discovery systems. And you can, and once you allow us to use this data here in these workflows, it means that you will be able to collaborate now with other institutions. You'll be able to benchmark yourself with other institutions, and it opens a lot of new opportunities that have never been offered in the system. So after I've clicked yes, now the relevant roles will have a new area called collection development. Now those who have Rialto are probably identifying this icon already, because this icon changed from market to collection development a few months ago. And now it actually is representing what it means. And we have a workflow, a new workflows, retention and deselection. If you have Rialto, then you just have this new section in the menu. If you don't have the existing, current marketplace Rialto, you will have only these workflows, but these workflows are quite powerful. And within the next few months, we will be adding more and more features here. So even if you don't have the marketplace implemented, we are planning on adding more and more features to support collection development for all Alma users. So let's now go ahead and see what are these workflows. So we'll start with retention. And the reason why we'll start with retention and deselection are basically, as I said before, mirror workflows to each other. Because though I hear a lot more about libraries that are busy with deselection and with weeding, our recommendation is to start with retention first, because in retention, the goal is to identify candidates, to identify items that you might want to consider to commit for retention. And then that will protect you when you do your deselection workflow and you make sure not to get rid of anything by mistake. So you can go ahead and do a deselection workflow immediately, but maybe it's worthwhile to use the retention workflow and identify items that you want to commit for retention. So I'm going into the workflows, and in this demo environment, we have ran already a few projects. So just to give you the structure of the project, this looks like a classic Alma page, right? And you have a list on the left, and these are the lists of projects. And on the right, you have the form for each project. So just to explain a bit more about those projects, the concept here is this: you can create as many projects as you like. And the reason that we offer you this is that you might want to have very small projects, very focused, that look at very particular questions, or you might want to have a very wide scope that runs across all your institution. And that really depends on your preferences. So you don't need to be worried or afraid about how many projects to create. You can be very, very focused on very specific questions if you like, or you can go ahead and run a huge project that will run across all your institution. Let's start with a very simple example. Let's say that in my institution, I have faculty that I want to identify and make sure that they are committed to retention. That's a very common use case. So in order to do that, I would create a new project. I would click here, the add project. I have now a new a small pop-up that shows up where I give a name to my project. In this case, let's say that I have a professor called Paul Woodruff, who's a professor for Greek philosophy, and I want to make sure that his writings, his works are remaining in my institution no matter what. So I'll give the name a project, right? And then I can write a description here, or maybe right here, or faculty or something. Now, before I create the project, I want to point out to this checkbox here: review only within libraries in my institution. Now, this is very important to point out to, because this changes your workflow. So what we're offering here is two types of workflows. One workflow looks at my institution or at my scope, whether it's specific libraries or a specific campus, and then compares it outside to institutions outside of mine. However, if I click the review only within libraries in my institution, I can create comparisons internally. It won't look outside, but it will allow me, for example, and I'll show you an example later on, to compare between different campuses in your institution, between different libraries, maybe identify duplicates and so on. So if I click this, it's not going to go outside. for the purpose of this project, I would not check this and just go ahead and create the project. I'm not going to create the project, and instead I'll go into an existing one just because I don't want to take the risk when doing a webinar that something is not going to go, won't work well, which happens many times in webinars. So I'm going into an existing project that I've already opened. And once I click the edit button, which is here, right, then now I have my open form. So basically I have the same form, just the same form that I would have if I clicked create. I gave the project the name, I gave it a description. I can see that it's a retention project. I can see that it's, this is not check the review only within libraries in my institution. And also I'll just point out that if when I create the project, I check the private area, then this project will not be seen by any other user besides me, which also is something that we know that sometimes you want to do. So now I'm going to go ahead and define my scope. So in this case, I can go into select libraries within my institution. This means I'm going to go in here and choose where I want to do the analysis. What is the scope of my analysis? It could be all my institution. And actually, if I don't fill in here anything, it's going to cover all my institutions. So I just can avoid going in to this component at all. That will be the default. Or I can go into the component, and then I can go ahead and choose the libraries or campuses that I want to focus on. Okay, so in this case, I've chosen the library and information science and main library. These are the two libraries that I want to identify titles that are written by Paul Woodruff. And then I have the number of items per title and institution selected or selected libraries do not exceed. Now, what does this mean? From what we hear, we worked a lot with early adopters. So from what we hear, usually institutions choose to do their retention projects when they reach some kind of threshold. So it could be that they just want to find those titles that have one last copy and then decide then. And this is what this represents, okay? It's one. So only if I have a title that does not exceed in number of items more than one, then it's a candidate for retention. I can also go ahead and ask the system to only bring me items that are in reading lists. And that probably would change the scenario of the project. Maybe I want to do a very specific project dedicated to items in reading lists. That would be a separate project. And by default, I have this checked as well. Suggest only items for titles that do not have an item committed to retain within the institution. What that means is that if I have already a single item, but that single item is committed for retention, or if I have a few items and one of them is committed, and one of the items for that title is committed for retention, then I don't get any suggestions for retention for the flow, which makes a lot of sense because I've already committed that an item from that title for retention. I can go ahead now and define classifications, which I'm not going to do here because in this case, I'm just looking at a specific author. But if I wanted to look at a certain classification, I could have chosen from Dewey, LC, or NLM. And I'll show you an example of that later. And then we have the additional fields, which is probably the most useful section from what we hear, well, from what we see with our early adopters, and that's basically an advanced search. So you can go ahead here and define, and in this case, I'm going to use the advanced search, and I'm going to define that the creator contains the keywords Paul Woodruff, and doing that, I'll identify the titles that were written and created by him. Now here we have a label section. The label section, I'm going to show you later how we can use it. This is a new feature that's going to be introduced during 2026 when we shift to the new physical items design, user experience, but we are already utilizing this feature here and now in these workflows. And I'll show you how we can use it. It can be actually a very useful tool as part of our process. And last, I have my comparison. Now I can compare outside. Let's say that there's another university that I collaborate with, that Paul Woodruff teaches as well. And we decided to divide among our collections who's going to retain what. Okay. And in this case, because we are in demo environments, the name of that university is TR Integration. That's a great name, right? And we are going to compare our collection and see if anything is held also by TR Integration, and then maybe we can define together with them and see who will commit what for retention. Now, I want to point out a few more things in this compare to component. This is a very powerful component. This is what allows me that new level of collaboration. So first of all, if I'm part of a network zone, and I'll check this, select all opted in network members, all opted in network members for comparison, this basically means that I can now immediately, with one check, with this check, select all the institutions in my network and compare to them. But it, of course, depends on them opting in. If they haven't opted in, they won't show here. So if I want to know who is opted in, if I want to know who am I comparing to, I can just hover here over the I, and I can see opted in members, and I can see that there's one more institution, Alma University. That's another demo environment. So this is a way to compare immediately to my network. Many times, the shared print or the shared collection work is done within a network framework, and this is a great way to save time and immediately just go ahead and compare. I can also compare to pods if I have Rapido and see if something is held by an institution that's part of my pod. And I can also go ahead and just choose other institutions that are opted in. So what we have here is a very powerful tool that allows me both to compare with members in my network, but also if I want to compare with institutions outside, I can do that as well. Now here I have the comparison method. Now what this comparison method means, first of all, if I hover here, I have an explanation of what can I expect. But to put it very simply, when I compare with institutions outside for retention, what I want to know is, am I the only one holding this title? If I'm the only one holding a title, that might be a good reason to commit something for retention. So basically, if the institutions that I've selected are holding that title, maybe I don't need to do a retention project. But maybe what I want to consider is not if the title is held by other institutions, but is it committed for retention by other institutions? And that is the second option. Okay, so suggest items that are not held by any selected institutions or are held by institutions but are not committed to retain. So that way I know if there's other institutions that are holding this title, I will know that, but I'll know that they're not committed for retention, and this is an opportunity for collaboration. I can now reach out to that institution and decide together what they want to do, which is what I want to do in this case. And many times, I would want to know what is outside in one of those external databases. So far, we've already installed HathiTrust or connected to HathiTrust. So you can see if something is held by HathiTrust and choose that as part of your search, and you'll get information. And maybe this is probably more relevant for deselection, but also for retention. If something is held by HathiTrust, then I probably don't need to retain it. But again, this is probably not the case in this use case when we're talking about faculty. When I'm talking about faculty, it doesn't matter to me if it's held by in an external database. I want to have that specific title held also in my library. Great, so we filled this form, and now we're going to go ahead and save. And once we saved, we'll go and generate the project. And once we generate a project, and it may take a few minutes, it may take more. It depends on the size of the project. I'll be honest. Sometimes it can even take over an hour if you're going to run a project that's looking at millions and millions of lines and going through different databases. You can imagine checking something in a network and looking at millions of items moving from one database to another. That can take time. But our assumption is that these kinds of workflows do not require an immediate response. This is strategic. And therefore, if it takes even an hour, it's a job that runs behind the scenes. It doesn't stop anything. You can keep on working. You can create more projects. It's just a job. And once that job is over, you'll get the results. And you can see on the left here, by the way, the status of your projects, right? So once recommendations are generated, you'll see this status. And then when you start reviewing the project, you'll see project review. In this case, with Paul Woodruff, we're in a review and process because in the past I've already went into this project and have reviewed it. So let's have a look and see what are the results that we got. View recommendations. Okay, so what we see here is, and let me just open it first on full screen, we see that we found 2 titles. And we already see what we call clickable badges. And these clickable badges correspond with what I filled in my form. Okay, so I have here now, for example, I have here a badge telling me that this is the last item within my library scope. Okay, so I have only one item within the 2 libraries that I've selected. But I also have something very interesting here. I can see that it's available elsewhere. I'm going to click that. It opens on the right side, and I can see that it is held by TR Integration, but it's not committed to Retain. On the other option, if I go to this one, I can see that it's a single item in my library scope, but it's also a unique title. When we say unique title, what we are referring to are all the institutions that you looked at. And if I'm the only one holding that title, then it's a unique title. So I have here both a single item and a unique title. That looks like a pretty good candidate for committing for retention. And maybe for this one, maybe I can talk to TR Integration and they would commit it for retention, or I would do that. Okay, but I know that information. I have now that room for collaboration. And once I saw these results, I can go ahead and now I have various options I can do. I can do them as bulk actions, or I can go and do them one by one. So if I choose this item, for example, I can just go ahead and commit it to retain. And what it will do is basically open a very similar form to the form that you have in Alma. It's actually running on the same database. It's doing the same things. It's just from here. I don't need to go identify that physical item and go ahead and edit it. I have it right here, and I can just go and commit it for retention. Okay, in this case, probably I would choose the faculty publication, and then I can go ahead and commit it for retention. Now, I can also do some bulk actions, and I want to take this opportunity to show you also those labels that I pointed out before. So the labels are not supported yet in the physical items, but they are supported here. And they can be a part of your process, because maybe you identified those items for retention, but you still need to advise, or you need your collection manager to actually confirm or do the actual action. Maybe you're not, maybe you don't even have the permission to commit for retention. In that case, what you can do is just add a label. So you'll go to manage labels after I did bulk, and maybe I'll now create a new label. And this label, let's call it consider for retention. Great. And I'm just going to click it, and I'm going to click apply. And now, there we go. I have these items with labels. Now, why this is useful, because I can even go ahead and create a new project looking at trying to identify items for retention. And I can define there, bring me all those items that have this consider for retention label. So you can already see how we can use these labels for the physical items in the collection development workflows today as part of your processes. It can be a very convenient way to work. You can also add those to an itemized set. You can remove them from the list. And what I would also like to show you here is that we have on the right a summary of our project. And once we have any actions that remove things from the list, like adding them to a set, like committing them for retention, you will see this bar being updated. And maybe I can demonstrate that for you in a moment. Let's go ahead and have a look at another retention project. Let's say that in this case, I want to identify old material on music, and I want to do that only for projects that are not in English. Okay, so works that are not in English. So I've created, right, I would go here and create a new project, and then I have my form, and I've added in my description old music literature, let's say between 1850 and 1960. And my scope, I'll define all my libraries in this specific campus, and I would stay with the same criteria of one item per title. But now I need to go ahead and choose my classification. I'm going to work with LC classification, and then I can go ahead and choose music. And you can see that with this tree diagram, I can go ahead and even go into a higher and higher resolution as part of my classification. And then I can also define publication years. If I keep it empty, it will look at everything. If I add the publication years, it's going to limit it to titles that are only with these specific bibliographic details. And in this case, I'm going to use the additional fields again, but this time I'm going to use language not equals English. And again, I can compare and see if this is held. Before I go ahead and commit these for attention, I want to see if they are held by TR integration by that same institution. Great, we've done that. We're going to save the project, and we're going to generate recommendations, and we'll go ahead and view the recommendations. And again, what we can see here is that all the items that the system offers us to commit for attention are there for a very good reason. They're single items. They're the last copies in my scope, but they're also unique titles. So you can imagine I could have compared this to a lot more than one institution. I could have compared it to a whole network, maybe even of 90 institutions. If I'm the only one holding this title, that's probably something that I want to take into account. And then again, I can go ahead. Maybe I'll just demonstrate for you. So let's say that this title is not something that I want to commit for attention, and I want to remove it from the list for some reason or another. I'm going to click here, remove from the list. I can even add a label if I want. Maybe I will add a label so that way we can find it later on, and then I'm going to remove it from the list. Okay, so even when I remove from the list, I have an opportunity to create a label, some kind of indication, so I can work later with this item. Removing this item from the list, and that's very important to say, has no effect on your Alma workflows. These are only the collection development workflows, so really nothing happened to this item, right? We're removing it from the list. And the reason why I want to show you this is because I want to now go back and then go back into the project and show you how it refreshed the summary. There we go. You can see that we have already removed one of the items, and you can see your progress, how you're doing in the project until you complete your project. Okay, let's go ahead now. We have a few more minutes before we leave time for questions and have a look at the deselection. So we'll go into our menu and choose deselection. And as I said, the deselection is the mirror image of the retention. Here we want to identify items for weeding. We want to identify items for deselection, and there are many criteria, many reasons why we would want to do that. So one reason is maybe usage. Maybe I'm actually not supporting a certain area anymore. So I want to show you an example of, let's say I want to identify all my titles under the literature classification. Okay, so again, here I'll create a project. I can call it, right, literature. And maybe, again, here, I'm going to do it. I have maybe some kind of shared print program together with the other institution or many institutions. So I'm going to see if it's held by them. And then according to that, we'll make a decision who deselects. But generally, I want to get rid of items under the literature classification. And then I can give it, again, here, let's go in and go into the form. So I can now go ahead, I can give it a description if I want. I can choose, again, the scope. In this case, this time, I'm going and looking at all my institutions. So you can see that they're both selected. But as I said before, if I don't choose anything at all, okay, it would be the same. It will just ignore, it will just assume that I chose the whole institution. And here we have exactly the opposite of what we saw in the retention. So the number of items per title selected libraries exceeds, and now I need to choose. It could be that I want to identify all those items that I have many, that I have multiple items per title for. So maybe I'll tell the system, show me only all the multi-item titles. So let's say that multi-items would be 4, okay, or 5 items per title. And then it will show me only items that have 4 and above, titles that have 4 and above items. But in this case, I'm actually going to stay with the 1. I can check this if I want, suggest only items that are not in reading lists, right? So I make sure that I don't deselect something that's part of a reading list. And again, I'll also ask it to suggest only items for titles. This is an option if I want to do, I don't have to do that. Suggest only items for titles that have at least one additional item committed for attention, right? So maybe I want to make my project narrower and clean up and read only items that I have already one of them for attention. That's what this checkbox would do. And then I can go ahead and define usage. And here we tried to leave it as flexible as possible. You tell the system what you consider as low usage. So the total usage per title can be, I don't know, 5 loans in the past 3 years. Okay, if you have less than 5 loans in the past 5 years, that is what's considered for you low usage. And then I'll go ahead, like before, go into my bibliographic details, define my classification, right? Define which classifications. I'm choosing the literature. And in this case, I'm not choosing any publication date. And again, I'm comparing to TR integration, but this time it's the other way around. Suggest items that are held by any of the selected institutions. So I just want to know what is held by other institutions, and it doesn't matter to me if they're committed for attention or not. I'll go ahead and save the project, and now we'll generate the recommendations, and after we've generated recommendations, we'll view them. And I got 9 items. And here again, you can see how the badges correspond with the criteria that I defined. So first of all, I can see this is a single item in my institution, and I can see that it's not retained by others, and it's low usage and available elsewhere. Okay, this may be a good a good reason to deselect. However, it is not retained by others. Maybe I feel much more comfortable doing deselection if it is retained by others. Well, interestingly enough, the next item on the list has available elsewhere, but does not have the warning not retained by others. So let's see what happens if I click it. Aha, okay, so you see that I have now this title, and it is committed to retain. So maybe only those 2 titles I'll feel comfortable to commit for attention. And this is where I can really benefit from the facets. I have great facets on the left that I can use. And as you can see, one of the possibilities that I have is not retained by others. Now, not retained by others would give me actually the items that I am not sure if I should consider, if I should deselect, but I can also get the opposite. I can click here and exclude not retained by others. And what that means is that it's going to give me now only the 2 items that are held and retained by others, and therefore I can feel comfortable withdrawing them. And if I have the correct permission in Alma, right, and that's also very important to mention here, I will have the withdraw from repository button. Of course, if I don't have permission in Alma to withdraw, I won't have that. And again here, maybe withdrawing is a long process. I know in different institutions, it looks different. I can go ahead and maybe create a label again. So I'll go to the labels, and this time I can say, consider reading, and I'm going to choose it and apply it, and it's going to be on these 2 items. Okay, and if I don't want it, maybe I don't want to use this actually, then I can now identify those consider reading and apply, and we're going to take them off. Okay, so you see we have a badge that shows us about usage. We have knowledge about how it's held with other institutions. We know how many items we have. A lot of great information that can help us make that decision for deselection, which is not an easy decision, but a very important one. Before we move before we move forward, we don't have a lot of time left, so I just want to show you one more aspect of a project, another project, and that is internal, right? If you remember, when we start a project, if I click here, if I check here, it will run a project that's internal. So I just want to show you an example of that kind of project. So in this case, it's a project that's internal. You can see that we have it checked. Review only items within libraries at my institution. And what I tried to do in this project is, let's say that I want to get rid of all the duplicates of items, of titles that are held in my main library. That means I want to look at all the other libraries and get rid of the items that are held in other libraries if they are held in the main library. So I would go to the scope and say, look at all these libraries. That's what I'm doing here, besides the main library. And then and here, by the way, I did it as a very big project. I didn't define anything else. It's a wide scope project. And then I'm going to compare it only to the main library. Okay, that's an interesting comparison. And then if I run this project, it's going to give me results that are only internal. It's going to look very similar to what we did when we look outside, but it's looking at only at the libraries that I've defined internally. So what I'm getting now is recommendations for items that I that I can deselect because they have at least one item held in the main library. Okay, and if you see this icon, what this icon means is that I can see all the other items that I have. Now, if these items are also candidates for deselection because they meet the requirements that I defined, I'm going to see them on the left as well. Okay, so I have here a lot of information that I can use now to go ahead and do an internal deselection project, making sure that I don't have duplicates in libraries that I don't need, and so on. So this is just an example of a different type of project. So this is the demo. This is what you can do with the retention and deselection workflows, and which you can enable easily with the configurations, as I showed you before, by simply providing consent in the data sharing profile. And let's go back to our presentation. Okay, I'm going to rush through these slides. And okay, one more thing that I just wanted to show you, which I think is very interesting, and that is that we've designed these workflows to be as customizable as possible. We realize that every institution has their own way of doing things, and this is why a lot of aspects, including the actions, if you saw, right, you can do jobs, you can create sets, you can put labels. You have a lot of different actions that you can do because every institution has their own way of doing things, and they can use and utilize those different tools that we're packing into these workflows in order to meet your processes. One of the big things is, how do you define usage, right? So what you have here is that you'll go to, you know what, I'll just show you the demo environment again. And if you'll go to the configurations and just go to collection development and to the usage calculation, you can define what is usage for you. Okay, it could be with in-house uses, doesn't include in-house uses, lending requests, loans, and even if you include the migrated loans or not. So this is just an example of how we built this system to be as customizable and built for your processes. So you'll define what is usage, and then the usage calculation that you have is basically built on the information that we collect behind the scenes for all these types of uses. Okay, sorry. Yeah, that's the right one. Okay, so let's go to our next slide. Roles and permissions. So the philosophy here for roles and permissions is that we did not create here anything new, but actually what we're streamlining here are existing Alma actions that are just using system-generated recommendations based on your criteria. Therefore, the roles and permissions align with what they can do in Alma. Now, another important key principle that you need to remember is that these lists, as lists, have no impact on Alma operations. When they do have impact is only when you choose to act upon them. When you actually go to the recommendations and act upon them, then they behave like Alma actions. So of course, also those actions will only be available if you have the right role. So for example, if I'm gonna withdraw an item, that is something that's limited, for example, to physical inventory operator extended. If I don't have that extended role, I won't be able to withdraw. So I'll be able to see the workflows, but I won't be able to withdraw. So generally, view and create projects. These are the roles that can view and create projects: physical inventory operator, repository administrator, Rialto administrator, Rialto manager. But the actions are, of course, directly aligned with Alma. And I do want to mention here that there has been, with the release, already discussion in our Alma list about the roles. And we are monitoring this closely and in touch with the early adopters and discussing this. And if we will need to do certain improvements, we will do them, because the most important thing for us is that you all feel comfortable using these workflows and really utilizing these amazing tools that we've created here. So what's coming ahead? We have a lot of things, a lot of features that are coming. All these features are features that came from early adopters that have been giving us great feedback, working very closely with us, very cooperative and collaborative. So you can be sure that these workflows are corresponding with real needs. So one of the very cool things that are going to be added, actually, I think even in December release, is having the ability to upload an Excel file or an Alma set of items, and then just going ahead and using those benchmarking capabilities with prepared lists that you already had in advance. So you're basically skipping a stage. You're already giving the system, feeding the system with a list of items that are candidates for you, and then we're going to do that further analysis for you and the capability to run actions. We're adding the usage criteria to the retention workflow, which currently does not exist. It's only in the deselection. Digitization requests will be added to the usage options. We're going to be adding some additional bibliographic information about the other institutions holding. Of course, that's limited, but the idea here is just to give you the transparency so you will know how we did the match and you'll feel comfortable with the match. Transparency is key here. It's very important for us. And this leads to this very special feature that we're working on, which will come later on in 26, which is an Excel file that represents and includes all the data that you have in those workflows that you can work with, because we realize we live in a real world and these are real world solutions, and sometimes you want to run and further massage that data in Excel, and we understand that, and we're going to allow you to do that as well. Another cool feature that's coming soon is a component for P&E overlap for the deselection. That first we'll run through the early adopters to make sure that we have good matches, and then we'll go ahead. And then we have the print serials, which is a huge, huge challenge, a lot more complicated, very fuzzy data, and we'll see how we're going to do that. We'll try to give you workflows that will be the best that we can. It's not going to be at the same level, I think, as we have with the books, because the data is not as clear, right, with the division between the items and the titles. But the idea here is to start providing you with processes also to clear away print serials, which take a lot of shelf space. So this is our roadmap. So as I said, we have the print serials coming, and then we're going to start looking at the expansion workflow. And I'm going to stop here. We only have 5 minutes left, but I do want to leave a few minutes for questions. So do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. We have a few, so let's go over it really quickly. So the first one is, I've only activated the data sharing profile in the sandbox, not in the production system. Can the pilot be conducted entirely within the sandbox, or would it be better to start directly in the production system?
Okay, so let me explain here. The sandbox, that's a great question. The sandbox does allow you to experience these workflows, but actually when you give consent in the sandbox, it doesn't really give consent, which means that you can't compare with institutions, for example, that you would like to by giving consent in the sandbox. If you really want to run these workflows, you have to run them in production. You can do internal tests, and you can also use the institutions that have opted in. The month after, always the next release, you'll have those institutions in, but you won't be able to opt in through the sandbox. So it's possible, but limited.
So are holding criteria search as also possible? Call number, location?
So some of them we're looking into, but you will, and some of them you'll be able to filter by. We would like to hear more about what is missing there, but I think that some of them are already supported in the facets, and some of them, like location, are going to be addressed as we go on.
Okay. Next question. Does the project show how many titles have been checked before the recommendation is given?
Sorry again?
Does the project show how many titles have been checked before the recommendation is given?
Yes, you can see that. You can actually see that in the jobs. If you go to the jobs, you'll be able to see that.
Another question, how is it ensures that items are not being deselected simultaneously by network members? There's a time gap between the analysis and the deselection.
Okay. So first of all, it's true that you have to refresh, and probably you would get an error message if someone already did do a deselection project. This is all real-time data. It's not like analytics, but still, right, we are running jobs here. Probably if someone already did that analysis and did that action, you'll just get an error message.
Okay. How does the number of items per title and institution selected libraries exceeded box treat or handle multi-volume work?
Okay, that's a great question. We are actually avoiding looking at multi-volume books. At this point, we're going to have a unique workflow for multi-volume books. So this is actually not looking at titles that have the description part, which is usually used for multi-volume books. And we will have a dedicated workflow for that. Okay.
Would an institution be notified whenever a comparison is made against its collection, whether it comes from within the network zone or outside?
I assume that you're, when an institution is notified whether
comparison.
No. If you have provided consent, then your data is available there for the workflows. It doesn't have an effect on your system in any way, but you won't get a notification if someone did some kind of benchmarking or comparison.
Okay. The two Rialto workflows will remain free of charge in the long term if data sharing is enabled?
Correct. This also corresponds with the fact that these workflows were supposed to be Collecto in the past, and instead we kind of added them for Rialto, and they are free of charge.
Okay.
Yeah.
What mark fields are being searched? Sometimes a book title can be subsumed under the completion title, which doesn't necessarily include individual book titles within.
I don't know how to answer that question immediately. I can go and check that and give you a more detailed answer. But what I can say is part of the of what we are doing also with that Excel is really providing you as much fields as possible, so you will know how we actually did that match and what fields we looked at.
Okay, so let's have two more questions. Okay. Are all libraries in the network zone included in the synchronization, or only those that have activated collection development?
That's exactly, I pointed that out before, that really all members have to opt in if they want to be included. We can't do the, if we check the network zone and not everybody's included, then if you hover over that area, you'll see who are the institutions that have activated it. Okay.
Thanks for the interesting and clear demo. About collection comparison with institutions outside of Alma, what are the exact possibilities? Is it possible to configure as a database?
Okay, that's also a great question. First of all, in terms of our roadmap, we are looking to offer Rialto, and that probably will be the paid solution here, for institutions that are not Alma, just like we have for Rapido. So this is part of what we are looking into, and exactly in order to support shared print with non-Alma institutions. In terms of databases, you can't do that currently manually, but I mean, you can actually upload an Excel if that helps you in any way. But no, but that's only internal. So no, you can't do. We don't have a way to support now just an external file that you would upload. But that's an interesting idea.
Okay. And one last question in 1 minute delay. When will the P2E workflow be available?
So we are starting to test it actually in December with our early adopters. And once we see that the matches are good, I believe that in the first quarter of 26, we will already have that available for everyone.
Okay. So I think we've managed to answer all the questions. And if you have any more questions or any issues that are not figured out in this session, please reach out to us, either to me or Rafi. We'd be happy to assist. Thank you very much, Rafi, and have a great
Thank you very much for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.